Hello, Petals. How you doing? How are things going? How's life been? Apologies for the delay, but life, you know how it is and how things go. But yes, we all have the best laid plans of mice and men and all that malarkey. But I've ordered myself a new chair, which hopefully will come this week. That'd be quite nice. Bit more comfortable, you know, kind of like it helps to be able to do things when you're comfortable. I couldn't think of a better way to describe it then. But please let me know how you're doing. I'm loving all these conversations that we're having. I'm still missing out on one of us. I've not seen hide nor hair of one of us. So I'm kind of like a bit worried and a bit concerned. But thank you all for saying hello and let me know you're all right and you're out there. Yeah, I do worry. And I'm very grateful for each and every one of you. I really do appreciate you being here very, very much. Right. It's a long chapter. So I'm going to try and do the whole thing. But if not, I'm going to have to split it into two. And I don't like doing that. You know I don't. But I want to bring you a chapter. You know, I think this is probably in part why I've been quite late in getting back to it. Just one thing and another. You know how it is. But my lovely beans, if you could hit that like button, if you do enjoy it, subscribe, the bell, the notifications bell, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, share if you want to. Every little helps the channel keep going and ticking over and keeps us sort of like getting our word out there, as it were, because we like things to be wonderful and fluffy and yays. It's been a heck of a week, hasn't it? But this is our little bit of escapism away from everything else, and that's what we like about it, because it's away from everything. Okay, my lovely beans. Chapter 17 of Here Comes the Sun by the adorable, the amazing, the indomitable Mr. Thomas Holt. Bjorn carefully took the basin off the fire and tested the water with his finger. Then he took off his boots and put his feet in it. He'd been a long way, up as far as the first range of picturesque blue hills to the east, and halfway to the shadowy forest-clad slopes in the west, and still without finding so much as a kebab house. No, it is not. I'm sorry, but I will always say this with kebabs. I had a situation when I was out with the friends of somebody I was with ages ago. I'm talking freaking decades ago now. But one of these guys was really ridiculously tall, and I think his name was AD Bud, if I remember right. Well, that's irrelevant, but anyway. So we went to this nightclub, and we're all like kind of metalers and out and alternative and all this sort of thing. The nightclub's really trendy and stuff. And this guy is off his rocker. Well, not his off, you know, I was going to say off his tits, but I don't know if I can say that. But anyway, he was conquered, absolutely out of it. And he was drunk as anything. And he went up to this big burly sort of bouncer guy, but he towered over him. And he wanted this like bouncer guy. He's like, "One kebabu, please." He honestly thought the nightclub entrance was a kebab shop, and I don't know how. Oh my goodness. So I don't eat kebabs, but that is my happy memory of kebabs. Do you have a kebab memory? Yeah? Right, let's get back to it. Sorry, we'll start. We'll get there again. He'd been a long way, up as far as the first range of picturesque blue hills to the east, and halfway to the shadowy forest-clad slopes in the west, and still without finding so much as a kebab house, let alone the Kentucky Fried Chicken of his dreams. Shadowy forests and verdant meadows, yes. Food, no. He poked his little fire with a stick and cast a furtive glance over his shoulder at a shyly grazing fawn. This place, he said to himself, is the absolute pits. Above him the sun shone, casting long, sharp-edged shadows on the bawling green grass of the river valley. He lay on his back and he stuck his tongue out at it. Now, it's not Sean or Sean. I say Sean, but I think Americans say Sean, and I don't get it. But anyway, I digress. Years ago, he remembered, I worked for those bastards. Best use of my eternal bloody life I gave them. Lugging great heavy boxes about mostly. It wasn't fun exactly, but at least a bloke could go down the social club with his mates, play a few games of pool, have a couple of pints, and a pack of chips afterwards, throw up over a parked car or two, and trip over a dustbin before going home. At least there were pavements and gutters, and the water came out of taps instead of lying around in riverbeds where leaves and stuff can fall in it. And then he recalled. Still years ago, he was working on the sun.
Nothing exciting, just cleaning it off at the end of the day, hosing it down, scraping the squashed flies off the windshield. And something went wrong, or some daft bugger made a really big cock-up, and everybody reckoned I knew what it was, because I was in the sheds working when it happened, whatever it was. So they said, anyway. News to me. But still they said that whatever it was had to be hushed up, and I'd have to go, and I could either start a new life somewhere else, somewhere idyllic, or else. Well, I can't remember what. I think it was just, or else. Bastards.
The fawn was looking up at him out of great round black eyes. He relaxed and smiled.
Here, baby, he chirruped. Who's a pretty little dear, then?
With some of those wild leeks from under the trees over there, and maybe some watercress, he whispered to himself.
You could do worse.
And then the fawn pricked up its ears, swivelled its head, and darted away. A forlorn attempt to hit it with a rock at 20 yards failed. Bjorn sat down again and started to massage the soles of his feet. And then looked up. There was a girl standing over him. A tall girl, with long straight hair, a sort of chestnut brown, and light blue eyes, and a kind of mischievous angel half-smile on her slightly parted lips, and more to the point, knockers like footballs. Bjorn opened his eyes wide and let his jaw drop.
He said,
but it came out as a real thoroughbred mumble.
Sorry, was that your, dear?
The girl brushed a strand of hair out of her eyes and knelt down beside him on the grass. She was wearing a simple peasant blouse, the sort that they don't even bother putting the price on in printemps, and in her right hand she held a basket of strawberries. She said. Bjorn had a couple of goes at swallowing his Adam's apple and grinned stupidly.
Yeah, he said. Right,
The girl laughed, and her laughter was like the soft splashing of a mountain tarn, or alternatively ice-cold lager hitting the bottom of the glass. Bjorn blinked and instinctively started to pull on his boots. Said the girl, and it occurred to Bjorn, apropos of nothing much, that her eyes were they were pretty neat eyes, you know?
Hi, he croaked. I'm Bjorn. Yep, right.
The girl laughed again, and this time, hell, you could almost taste the hops. Then she took a strawberry from the basket and popped it into his mouth before he could close it.
All right, he said. Thanks. Thanks a lot.
The girl leaned forward and kissed the top of his head, and it seemed to Bjorn that the smell of her hair was like the first cigarette after a 12-hour night shift in the explosive store. Then she giggled, stood up, and walked away. About 5 minutes later, Bjorn stopped staring at where she'd been and spat out the strawberry. His left leg had gone to sleep, and something small and hairy was running about inside his boot. In the shade of a thicket of wild laurels, two shy, velvet-antlered fawns were laughing themselves sick. Jane opened her eyes. And a fat lot of good it did, too. In order for your eyes to be of any use, it helps if you're not in a windowless cavern hundreds of feet below ground with the lights off.
Hello,
said a voice above her. She tried to move, but that was a washout, too. Somebody or something had done a pretty neat job of tying her to what her intuition told her was a railway sleeper. A long way over her head, more or less where her instinct suggested the voice was coming from, she became aware of a low, crunching noise, like a steamroller creeping slowly up a gravel path. "Hello?" she whispered.
"Oh, good, you're awake,"
replied the darkness. The voice was masculine, probably, but beyond that it was monumentally nondescript. It had no accent, gave no indication of age, and if it happened to be speaking in English, Jane felt, that was probably due to some fiendishly advanced simultaneous translation system.
"My name is..."
And it said something Jane didn't grasp, but which sounded very like, "I see." Couldn't be that, of course. Stood to reason. "What am I doing here?" Jane inquired.
"No, I don't know. IC replied. Can't see in this light. Don't you think it's terribly dark in here?
Yes, Jane replied, trying to ignore the creeping sensation she was experiencing, which felt rather the way she imagined it would feel if you had someone cleaning the marrow out of your bones with a pipe cleaner. Narrator's note, I freaking love Tom Holt similes.
Shall we have the lights on then?
Yes, please. Well, we all say silly things sometimes, and she wasn't to know. So when the lights suddenly came on and she started to scream uncontrollably, there was a small part of her brain that was able to say, wasn't my fault, and mean it.
Gosh, said IC. Is there anything the matter?
By way of reply, Jane screamed some more. A lot more, in fact. Even when the lights went out again, she carried on whimpering and gibbering for nearly 2 minutes, which is a very long time.
Better now. Sorry? I hope I didn't startle you, said IC. Perhaps I should have mentioned that some people find my appearance distressing. Me, for one, he added.
Jane subsided into a series of short, mucus gasps. The voice waited for a while, and then cleared its throat softly.
It scares the living daylights out of me sometimes, IC said, depending on what frame of mind I'm in, by the way.
He went on.
My full name is Executive Officer IC Reprogramming and Mental Aberration Adjustment. My friends call me IC for short, or rather, they would if I had any.
He paused.
I don't, though, he added. I think my appearance is against me, you see.
There was a sigh.
Before that, IC went on. I was called Retribution, and I didn't mind that, because then I could be Ret for short, like Ret Butler. But the chaps upstairs thought Retribution was a bit downbeat, so they changed it. These days they like to stress the positive aspects of the work we do here. Uphill job, mind.
Jane sat frozen. She was aware of the inordinate length of time it was taking the big blob of sweat to reach the end of her nose, and it dawned on her, or at least upon a part of her mind that was playing roughly the same role in this episode as the orchestra played in the sinking of the Titanic, that fear is another dimension.
Anyway, IC went on. I don't mind what I'm called these days. Now that I've had a chance to get used to it, it's pretty apt, really. Because people see Retribution the way they want to see it, so I look different to everyone. Horrible, of course, but different. So I think IC is a pretty good name, don't you think?
The voice paused.
Because it's up to your eye to see me the way you think I ought to be, okay? How did I come across to you, by the way?
Jane swallowed hard and discovered that someone had laid a thick concrete path right down her throat. You were very big, she said. Huge and slimy, and you had little strips of flesh still stuck to your bones, and there were these maggots.
Ah.
There was, far away in the darkness, a faint sniff.
Seems like you didn't catch me at my best. Maggots, did you say? What a perfectly horrid idea, said the voice. I must say, you've got a rather nasty imagination there. Perhaps you ought to see somebody about it.
There was a long silence.
Well, said IC, this is all very well, but it's not getting us very far. Look, would you mind awfully if I just had a little light? I promise to keep out of your field of vision, only, well, the truth is I get sort of nervous in the dark. It's probably because I'm afraid that I'm out there somewhere. Maggots, he repeated with distaste. Whatever next?
Go ahead, Jane quavered. I'll shut my eyes. There was a click, and then a faint glow began to permeate the darkness, like ink soaking into blotting paper.
People find that closing your eyes doesn't actually help, IC remarked. Tell you what, I'll hide behind the flywheel. You won't be able to see me then.
Slowly and deliberately, Jane counted up to 10. Ready? She called out.
Ready.
She opened her eyes. To her overwhelming relief, all she could see was an enormous machine. It wasn't anything identifiable like a printing press or a hydraulic ram. Imagine a top film designer had been told to design a machine for a horror film set. Well, that was what it was like, a really, really top designer. Where am I? She whispered.
Do you know
said IC's voice from behind the machine.
It's amazing how many people say that. And before I started working here, I thought it was only in books. You're in justice.
Jane's eyes widened until her memory told her to pack it in. Department of Justice, she said.
Got it in one. This is the engine room, as you'll probably have gathered already. What you're looking at right now are the actual mills of the gods.
That grind slow but exceeding small, you mean?
That's them.
IC replied.
Actually, he added, they don't. Not just at the moment. Right now they grind large and exceeding lumpy. In fact, 95% of the time they don't grind at all.
Jane replied. What am I doing?
Partly, IC went on, because the nut on the drive shaft connecting the flywheel to the cams has stripped its thread, and would you believe you can't get them in that size anymore because these days they're all metric. Partly because even if they were in full working order, they can't afford to run them for more than an hour a day because of the price of coal. Partly, well, mainly actually, because there's really no call for them these days.
Right, said Jane. Look, why am I tied to this lump of wood, and what am I doing?
In theory,
IC went on, and Jane began to wonder whether the maggots were really the least bearable thing about him.
They don't need them anymore because of me. De-automation, they call it. All the rage. Who needs machines when you can have people, they say. They don't give a damn for the effect it's going to have on the lives of hundreds of thousands of ordinary...
Jane coughed sharply. Excuse me, she said. The sound of her words faded away.
What they say is, IC droned on, who needs justice anyway? Outmoded concept, superhumanity has moved on since those dark and far-off days, that sort of thing. The idea is that they're phasing justice out and replacing it with retribution. With reprogramming and mental aberration adjustment. That's me, he added bitterly, and rehabilitation, of course. He's about here somewhere.
Jane swallowed. He is?
Unfortunately, IC sighed. Nasty piece of work. He makes me look like Tyrone Power, by the way. The idea being, said IC unpleasantly, that retribution might be nasty, but at least it's likely to be pretty exciting, whereas rehabilitation is just incredibly pointless and boring. They're right about that at any rate.
Jane digested that statement for a moment. Are there, any more of you? She asked tentatively.
Not full-time, no,
IC replied.
There's government, of course, but she only comes in 2 mornings a week, which is just as well if you ask me, because there's only 2 cups in the kitchen, and if there's one thing I can't stand, it's having my morning coffee out of a mug.
Government?
It's got Snoopy on it as well.
IC went on.
I'll swear it curdles the milk. Oh yes, government. You know, in a democracy, people usually get the kind of government they deserve.
Oh, right. Look, what am I doing here? There was a long, long silence, during which embarrassment joined the host of other unpleasant things floating about in the stale air.
Yes, said IC eventually. Look, it wasn't my idea. Not my idea at all.
Please, I mean, IC said, gathering a bit of his customary momentum.
It's bad enough being stuck down here in the dark and the damp with any rehabilitation for company. The only card game he knows is Snap, by the way, because of course he disapproves of gambling. He cheats. Why are you down here? Yes, I was just coming to that. There was another pause. And as for his charming habit of drying his socks over the radiator...
Please, Jane said sharply. Why am I here?
You really want to know?
Yes.
You're sure? I mean, a moment ago, you really wanted the light on and...
I'm really sure, yes.
Well,
said IC, and Jane would have sworn he was taking a deep breath if she didn't know for a fact that he'd have nowhere to put it.
The truth is, you've been promoted.
You could have heard a pin drop. It would have had to have been a largest pin because of the background noise. A crowbar, say, but at least nobody spoke. Promoted.
I thought you didn't really want me to.
Promoted to being tied up in a dark cellar with a thing like 18-inch maggots crawling in and out of it.
Please,
I see, exclaimed. Oh, God, you'll have to excuse me a minute. The light went out, and Jane heard the sounds of footsteps, followed by retching noises. A few seconds later, the lights came back on.
Sorry,
said I.C. hoarsely.
I've got a weak stomach, actually, and the thought of...
That's perfectly all right, said Jane, with feeling. It was thoughtless of me. But are you sure you mean promoted?
As opposed to what?
Well, found guilty, for starters. This really doesn't fit in with my definition of upwardly mobile, you know. There was a long sigh, and Jane tried not to visualise what the breath was coming out of.
It's a bloody awful job,
said I.C. at last.
Still, someone's got to do it.
Oh, Jane said. I think I see what you're getting at.
Do you?
Yes. I've been got rid of, haven't I?
That's right,
I.C. replied, avoiding Jane's eye.
I'm very sorry, he added. I truly am.
Can they do that? Jane asked after a moment. I mean, is it, well, legal? Just tying an inconvenient member of staff to a plank of wood and abandoning them in a cellar for ever and ever?
Oh, absolutely,
I.C. confirmed, and a hideous squeaking sound suggested that he was nodding his head, or what had remained of it, vigorously.
Their legal departments thought it all through very carefully. You see, the code states quite clearly that the employer is obliged to pay the employee the correct salary, depending on grade and experience, of course, and contribute to the pension scheme and let the employee have the agreed number of days holiday each year. There's nothing in there about what the employee shall or shall not be tied to.
Jane giggled. There was a faint metallic ring to her voice, which suggested that although she wasn't yet hysterical, this was only because she was saving hysteria for later. But I'm not really an employee, she said. I mean, I'm mortal. If I stay here, then sooner or later I'm going to die. Doesn't that sort of put a different complexion on it? There was a long pause.
Are we talking about statutory sick pay here?
I.C. inquired cautiously.
Because I don't know if death entitles you to that. Maybe it comes under the heading of early retirement. I think I'd have to look that one up.
Would you mind going away, please?
Sorry,
I.C. said.
I've offended you. I can tell.
It's not that, Jane assured him. Really, it's just that you might get embarrassed when I start screaming and...
Got you, said I.C. hurriedly. Yes, you've got a point there. Very considerate of you. I think I might...
He stopped in mid-sentence because a wall fell on him. The way Bjorn had worked it out was like this. There is no such thing as an ideal. Real life is nasty, sordid and boring, all about going to work and having to shave and the dustbin bags getting ripped open during the night by next door's cat. Even in an infinite universe, there is no way you can get a plastic fork that will not break. Therefore, the ideal I found myself in is artificial, and somebody's put me here to stop me wandering about. Clever, really. If you want someone to stay locked up, put him in a prison he didn't want to break out from, or at least one where he only finds out it's a prison when it's too late. He thought of Iona's father, washing the ox cart, not being allowed to walk on the floor, having to go out in the tool shed to smoke his pipe, and wondered what that poor bastard had done to offend the authorities. Something horrible, probably. Having reached this conclusion, he set his mind to planning his escape. He reasoned. This ideal is artificial, right? That means somebody made it. It's a thing. Things break when you hit them. The trick was to find the right spot. 10 years of splitting logs in the other bloody ideal had taught him it's no use going mad and slashing out wildly with the big axe, because all that happens if you do that is broken axe handles. You have to find the seam, the flaw, the crack, the split, the lie of the grain, and you can be through it like ice cream through the bottom of the corn on a sunny day. Narrator's note, I have... Seriously, the hair bear chopping wood, he can literally just... massive great stacks of wood he can do. It's quite fantastic, really. It's incredible how much you can get done. That was an eye opener in the forest of New England. That was quite cool. Yes, that was an interesting experience, actually. Anywho, I'm not allowed to shop objects. I would do a mischief, no doubt. And you don't do that. No. I don't know what I'm waffling about. I think it's because I've lost my page, but it'll be okay. Right, here we are, back to the story. 170 years in the clerk of the works department had taught him how to look at the sky and the horizon and find the joy in. He waited until nightfall, hiding out in the hayloft behind the smithy. Just after midnight, he opened the skylight and looked up. It was a clear night, and the stars shone out of a black velvet sky like rhinestones. Good. That made it easy. The sky with its million twinkling points of light is only wallpaper after all, put there to cover up the cracks in the vault of heaven caused by the use of cheap, bulk-bought plaster. Like all patterned wallpaper, it's a real cow getting the edges lined up properly. If you look long enough and know what you're looking for, sooner or later you'll find the point where the paper hanger cocked it up, where the constellation, whose real name is the toothbrush of Adonis, is duplicated on both sides of a millimetre-thick invisible line, and where the cosmos bulges out over an unsmoothed air bubble. Follow the invisible line down to ground level and you'll find a tree whose branches are a little bit higher on one side than the other. That's the join. Bjorn knew this because he too had served his time up on a high stepladder with a bucket to paste and a long brush. He even knew what was underneath the stars. A rather tasteless red-textured flock, very frayed, with patches of mould in places and a few snags and nicotine stains here and there. Many people have wondered what was there before the Big Bang. Well, where due north is now was where the dartboard used to be. If you're not in a hurry, it's possible just to peel the corner of the paper back, slip through and draw the paper back after you. If you couldn't give a toss, however, you simply pack dynamite around the roots of the tree, retire, light a cigarette, and the butt of which you carelessly discard. I see. Brushed brick dust out of what, for the sake of convenience, we shall describe as his eyes, and looked blearily upwards, to find himself staring at a distinctly unfriendly sight. It wasn't as bad as looking in a mirror, but hey, it was not far behind. On your feet, Bjorn said. Come on, I haven't got all sodding day. Icy blinked. Excuse me, he said. On your feet, Bjorn replied. Jump to it or you'll get my boot up your... He broke off and frowned. Well, it doesn't look like you've got one, but we can always improvise. Icy jumped up quickly. No, he said quickly. I really wouldn't want you to go to any trouble on my account. What was it you wanted to know? The way out. Icy cowered a little and backed away. He'd always wondered what it would feel like being really frightened. Well, he hadn't been missing much. That's going to be rather tricky, really, because there isn't one. At least, not in this dimension. I mean, not as such, strictly speaking, he added. Balls, Bjorn replied, talking of which, this way. At this point, Jane woke up. She'd been hit, oddly enough, by a falling star, and a fraction of a second later by a hand-sized lump of plaster. She groaned. 30 seconds is plenty long enough for quite a complicated dream, and Jane had dreamed that she was lying tied to a railway sleeper in the vaults of some vague but sinister building, while a monster who somehow managed to look exactly like her worst nightmare hid behind the thing like a giant beam engine and explained that henceforth everything in the world was now officially her fault. That's the trouble with the dreams you tend to get in the basement of the Department of Justice. No imagination. Oh, she said. Oh shit. This is a complicated moment to describe. So we'll get Icy out of the way first. When Bjorn looked round, saw Jane and began staring, Icy ducked behind a lump of wall, tiptoed quickly away and found himself in the middle of a grassy meadow. Realising he'd come the wrong way, he turned to go back, only to find that the hole he'd just come out of had mysteriously vanished and been replaced by a slightly asymmetrical tree. He spent the rest of the night wandering about dejectedly, trying to avoid polished surfaces and pools of standing water, and at dawn came across a beautiful young shepherdess who immediately took him home to meet her family. They were married 3 weeks later, and IC now divides his time between washing up, exercising a small vicious dog, and painting the windows in the spare bedroom, because he is simply Iona's husband. Nobody even notices what he looks like anymore.
Who are you?
Bjorn eventually asked. Queen Victoria, Jane replied. Look, will you please get this log off me? Bjorn felt cheated. He'd wanted to make a good impression. He'd wanted to stroll over and say, "Hey, lady, is that the railway sleeper bothering you?" He'd wanted to cut through the ropes with one clean sweep of his Zambian army knife, but the big blade was stuck fast, and the attachment for taking stones out of impala hooves was as blunt as an armchair. In the end, he managed to saw through the rope with a tin opener, but not before he trodden on Jane's foot and cut his fingers to the bone on the lanyard ring.
"There you go," he said. "No trouble."
Jane sat up and massaged her foot. "That is a matter of opinion," she said. "Look, you've broken my heel. Why don't you look where you're going?" Oh, what?
Sorry."
Bjorn stood on one foot and chewed his lower lip. Even thus might Perseus have looked had he swooped down from the vaults of heaven on his winged sandals, decapitated the dragon, and then rounded it off by stepping backwards onto the tail of Andromeda's pet cat.
"Sorry,"
he repeated helplessly. "That's all right," Jane sighed. "Now, do you know the way out of here?"
No,"
Bjorn replied, and blushed. "You don't?"
"Sorry."
"Never mind." Jane stood up, took off her other shoe, and neatly knocked the heel off against the side of the sleeper. "They were new on," she added ruefully. "Oh well, can't be helped. Do you have such a thing as a torch on you by any chance?" Bjorn shook his head, unable to speak. To get a line on his state of mind, imagine you've just kissed a sleeping princess in the enchanted castle, and she stirs and opens her eyes and turns her head, and then you notice the book beside her is called 1001 Cures for Chronic Insomnia. "Well, well," Jane tutted. "We'll just have to try and find the light switch, won't we? Come on, try and make yourself useful." So, this is going to be a two-parter. Much apologies, but I'm absolutely shattered. Oh, Jane and Bjorn have met up, and what is going to happen? What a team, eh? What a team. Anyway, I wanted to just at least get this done for you, and I'm going to do the rest of it hopefully tomorrow. Hopefully. I'm just going to try and do, if I stick it to kind of 10 to 12 pages, it's doable more frequently than 24 pages in a go, because I just could not. Because I just could. It's one of them days. So, you don't get away with it. Let me know you're okay. Let me know you're all right. And thank you all for being there. Thank you all for being you. I try to tell you as often as I can how much I appreciate you, especially when life out there's challenging. I'm being really tactful, and we've all got things that we're working with, and just know I do appreciate you. You are appreciated, and you do matter. So I'll finish this off hopefully tomorrow. If it's not going to be tomorrow, I'll do a little post or something so you know what's going on. But as for now, I'm absolutely paggered. I'm shattered. It's time to have a little nap. Have a little nana nap. Oh Lord, something just occurred to me. Superhero sleepies. Na. You see Bolt's just shouting at me outside. They're going, meow. I apologise for that joke. That was absolutely terrible. Oh, goodness gracious. But I am going to probably do that from now on. All right, I can't stop yawning, so I need to say... Oh. Okay, it's time for a nana nap, and I'm going to get this posted and then hopefully do the next one in the next couple of days. So, big love, take care. If you're too hot, drink water. If you're too cold, wrap yourself up like a human burrito. But most of all, take care, Petal, and I'll see you soon.